no stranger to Big Blend Radio. Mark Highland, the organic mechanic, is joining us on today's Garden Gossip Show to talk about his awesome new book, Practical Organic Gardening, the no-nonsense guide to growing naturally. I mean, it has everything from growing vegetables and herbs to mushrooms, flowers, lots of flower power in there, collecting rain in rain barrels, all about soil and having healthy soil, because apparently this is like one of our main resources in our country and around the world. So it's a big deal. Of course, you can get the book on Amazon, so check it out there. Mark is the president of the Organic Mechanics Soil Company. That's where we first connected with him a few years back. He started in 2006, and he's got a lot of training in regards to environmental horticulture, composting, and potting soil. And he's also a speaker that goes around promoting, educating, and inspiring people about the many rewards of organic gardening. He also served as a consultant for the EPA. That's important, and everybody right now, this is, organic gardening, whatever's going on with the EPA, this is one thing we can do to combat whatever's going on. I'm just saying. And he's also a consultant for the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, which is very cool. And he recently received the Young Professional Award from the Perennial Plant Association.
Cool.
Very cool. Go to his website, organicmechanicsoil.com, and he's even got soil you can buy online there, and it's organic and good. We know all about that soil. It helped us with a garden back in the high desert, helped to actually really fix whatever the developers did in building this house, whatever they did to that soil, he helped with that. And, of course, you can keep up with him on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram at Organic Mechanic Soil. Mark, welcome back, Organic Mechanic.
Thanks for having me back on the show.
Hey, it's been a while, and it seems like your business has been growing, and now this amazing book. You've been busy the last few years.
Been a little bit of a hamster wheel at times, but yes, we definitely been keeping busy. So.
That's awesome. I was looking now that people can buy or your soil online, even worm castings and all kinds of good stuff. And I know with your book you talk about practical organic gardening. It's really a paradigm shift we have to make. It's not just about growing vegetables on the around the corner where the sun is. This is like a huge deal, as well as part of a lifestyle. And before we get into that discussion, I really wanted to touch on the fact that your company also lives by those mottos. I was really reading about even your delivery trucks run on biodiesel, and so you've taken it not just in your lifestyle but also in your professional life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, environmental sustainability is a core value at Organic Mechanics, has been since day one. So it affects a lot of our decisions on the products we make, the materials we use, the process. So it all feeds. It's all a feedback loop. So it all builds, and the more sustainable you can be in various aspects of your life, the better off we all are. So.
Agreed. So what prompted you to write a book on organic gardening, but not just do here, this is how you grow your vegetables?
Yeah, I mean, one of my overarching goals is definitely to connect with gardeners, to share methods of organic gardening. The Organic Mechanics Soil Company is an arm of that, but I was asked by a friend if I was interested in writing a book on organic gardening, and I thought about it for a bit and then decided absolutely this is going to be a way to reach a lot of people, to share what I've learned from many different people over the past few decades, and help people build organic gardens around their properties, their homes, their businesses. So it was all about the sharing the message of organic gardening. This was an opportunity to do it, so I jumped on it.
Wow. And did it take you a while? Because, even looking at the photos and the projects, and it's just so well written, and it does really make you change.
Want to garden.
Yeah, it makes you want to garden. It makes you want to take these active steps. I know I look at what's going on around the country and certain rules being dropped, that are protective for us, not just for, wildlife and public lands, but that means that it's, we have to look at what we do as individuals to protect our health too. And that's that symbiosis between if the ground and the soil is healthy, so are we, and so is the water, And I feel like, when I was reading your book, I'm like, this is a step we can all take to feel good no matter what's going on in our country right now in regards to politics and the environment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You know, our backyards are our own places to get out, to enjoy, to breathe fresh air, to be in nature. And, you know, you have total control over your backyard, your property, your garden. You know, your choices get to, you know, dictate kind of what you do, and what you love is going to, you know, manifest in the garden. If you love flowers, hey, then you should plant a lot of flowers. If you love to eat blueberries in your pancakes or in your champagne, you should have some blueberry plants. And all of these things are totally attainable. Anybody who's listening, thinking, well, I have a brown thumb, I can never do it. You absolutely can. It just takes time and practice. It's just like anything. The first time you tried to ride a bike, you know, you had to practice. Everything takes practice, including gardening. And if you're not killing plants, you're not really gardening. You have to get out there and try. And that's just part of the joy of being in nature. You know, the cycle of growth, life, and death. I mean, you see it every year in the garden. You know, plants, little seedlings come up, they grow up, they bear fruit, and then eventually they die and go back to the compost heap. It's part of the cycle of life. There's so many lessons to learn in the garden. That's why I love getting outside as much as possible. Even in the winter, there's always something to see and do, and so yeah. I just love gardening and all that love into the book.
It truly is. It's one of those books we call a Bible book. Not taking any away from religion here. I'm just saying it's one of those books that if you're going to have one book on gardening, this is it. Like
this
it has.
One, yeah.
You haven't left anything out, and you can understand it, and it's fun. The projects are fun. I love all the bugs in there, you know, and I want to know, Nancy and I were talking about the stink bugs.
I know, because I was like, oh, look, the solution is go pick them up, you know. I'm like, oh, good.
do you just go for it? Do you wear a mask, you know, with stink bugs, or how do you do that?
You got to be brave. You know, whenever you're handling insects, you know, if you don't know what it is, you know, there's a chance it might, you know, try to, you know, quote unquote, bite you, even though most insects don't actually bite. They just have a stylet that looks like a drinking straw, and they might try to poke you with it. And some insects will secrete a substance that might, you know, itch or burn. So if you want to wear gloves, put on some gloves. But, yeah, you just got to have nerves of steel and just, you know, the stink bugs or Japanese beetles, you just grab them and throw them in a cup of soapy water. That works. You know, your hands are one of your greatest tools in the garden. You know, same thing when you're growing anything. They call them brassicas. That means broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale, all those wonderful veggies. There's an insect called cabbage looper. It's a white butterfly that flies around, lays eggs, and they're green caterpillars. They're very hard to see, but you just pick them off with your fingers. I just put them into my hand, and I'm telling you, if you have chickens, man, that's a delicacy, right? Delicious caterpillars for chickens. But I just put them on a spot where I know the birds will find them, and sure enough, they disappear within a couple hours. You come back from the garden, they're gone. Some birds found them and fed them to their babies. So you know, it's amazing what you can do just with your hands or a stream of water to keep things organic and control some pests.
My grandmother, she used to collect bugs off of her plants in her garden and throw them into a dish filled with near beer, and she said that stuff would kill anything. So she throw them in near beer.
Well, she was always the one who said you had to plant for us, and then you planted, you know, one one for God, one for
you, one for God, and one for nature.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, if you didn't believe in God, plant one for your neighbor.
That's how you do it.
I totally agree. You know, because if you don't know what the caterpillar is on your plant, I mean, you could be killing a beautiful butterfly. You could be killing, you know, something that is part of nature. And yeah, that's why I always grow a little bit extra parsley, just because that way you can have tiger swallowtails. And, you know, of course, a lot of people are planting, you know, butterflyweed, Asclepias, which is a great plant for the monarchs. You know, there's a lot of great butterfly food out there. And it's important to kind of know what you're looking at. And so that's why books like this, other insect books, you know, and I appreciate you all saying, wow, this is like the one book. And of course, I think it's a fantastic reference book because there's a lot of topics covered. But, you can only go so far with 56,000 words, and so to find out more about insects, certainly there are great books because there's so many different insects around the country, and butterflies are endemic, around different areas. So it helps to have a local guide for things. This is your great overarching, because a lot of these pests in here, everybody deals with, and everybody has to deal with soil. Everybody has to grapple with a lot of these things in the book. But if you don't know what it is, you shouldn't squish it until you know what it is, because it could be something really cool.
Exactly. I know it could be, we're looking at bees too, and people get all confused. And you really talked about, bees as well. And I just want to touch back on, and I love the fact that you talk about go and look about what's endemic to your area and locally, because, you talk a lot about native plants. And, I mean, you're basically going, plant everything you want, whatever you want, but, do it organically and as native as possible, and looking at your entire garden. I just want to touch base on when you said butterfly weed. This is different than butterfly bush, which is not a native, right? Butterfly weed it's a completely different plant, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a terrible common name because it says butterfly weed, and it makes you think you don't want it. But the Latin name Asclepias, it's a gorgeous plant. Has these kind of red, orange, yellow type flowers. There's also the native one on the East Coast. It's just all orange flowers. There's quite a few different species of the milkweed or swamp milkweed, Asclepias, out there, and butterflies love that plant. So it's absolutely gorgeous, but only one of many, right? And butterfly bush, that's different. That's known as Buddleia, and that can actually be more of an aggressive plant, just because it can seed in and take over wild areas. But, really, all plants are serving a purpose on this planet in terms of, helping hold the soil together, making air for all of us to breathe. So, I am all about native plants because that's supporting the wildlife that is endemic to your area. But it pays to, take a visit to your local botanic garden, your local public garden. There's so much knowledge to be learned there, where they will happily share details about what's native to your area. Also going to your local garden center. It's another great thing to do. It's a fun activity on the weekend to hit your local garden center and see what kind of plants they have. And with those two resources alone, plus maybe a book or two, you can get all the info you want on all your native plants that are local to your area that'll support your local wildlife.
I think what's exciting about it, too, is that we're going to discover things you don't know about the region. Like here in Tucson, I know last time we chatted with you, we were out in the Joshua Tree area, and then we traveled for 3.5 years on the road nonstop, and now we're back here, and it's this complete different desert environment. And, so we in Joshua Tree area in that high desert, people are like, you can't have a garden here. Well, we proved it wrong. You could. And
we had a super garden.
I mean, it was really thriving. We had, every kind of animal you can imagine, but we never saw snakes. And I think it's because we had so many roadrunners and cats and all the feral cats of the neighborhood. But anyway, here it's been really interesting, really looking at the native plants. We have this whole riparian area, and Tucson is pretty green-thumbed as a city, and a lot of native plants, saguaros and all that beautiful, it's beautiful. But to watch the different seasons over the last year and a half that we've been home, these different like fig beetles and cactus-eating beetles and all these beetles, and you start looking them up, and the different lizards, and if you keep your eyes open and you watch what goes to the native plants, a whole new world comes into view, a whole new, just this. It's like a new planet. It's like this natural paradise, and I wonder about kids getting in the garden. This is the coolest thing, too, because when we have gardens, we want kids in there, but we also, you make a point of this, you don't want kids playing in the garden when you've used pesticides.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, all too often when you see the signs in public places, don't walk on here, pesticide application, you absolutely do not want kids or even pets running around, or yourself for that matter, after anywhere where you see a pesticide application going down. And that's why I, of course, would love everyone to be organic in their backyards, not only for the planet, but for themselves, for their families. there's residue on everything. I mean, that's how pesticides work. If there was a residue on the plant, that's supposed to be there to kill the bug. So just because you sprayed it 2 hours ago doesn't mean that it's gone. I can touch it now. It's absolutely not. So that stuff is dangerous, and you always have to follow the instructions on the label, even if you're using an organic pesticide to control, say, aphids on roses or something. Like there are organic pesticides, but they're still not. You're still not supposed to be touching them with your bare hands or breathing them in. Safety first, of course, when it comes to that stuff. But yeah, I prefer a world without that. I'm okay with a few holes in some leaves now and then. If I see a bug problem, I'll wait. I'll let nature take its course. And sure enough, if you let the aphids go long enough, something's going to show up and eat them. Whether it's ladybugs laying eggs or ladybug larvae, they'll come in and eat. Lacewings will lay eggs, and they're voracious little predators. They love to eat those things. So it's about patience and
we had a ton of goldfinches come in and eat the aphids.
Yeah.
They just showed up one day and they went, look at this.
I know, just when we were going, we better do something. This looks crazy. And then it's true.
Here comes goldfinches.
At the height of the aphids, and then we didn't have a problem. It is true. So gardening teaches you patience and the world of balance, right? And that's the other thing, too. Some things I really didn't know, and you talk about recycling and really just getting into that lifestyle. But there was something that I did not know this. The longer shelf life of food is organic. And, so when you think about stores, a lot of times people won't buy organic because, the apple has a little bump in it, or, a bird pecks something out of it, so people don't think to buy it. And then you've got these shiny apples that are all red and waxy and whatever. And there's this mindset of those will last longer than the organics. And you're saying, no, that's not true. The organics have a longer shelf life.
Yeah, and there's a couple theories as to why that is. Basically, the basic gist is that organic crops, because they don't have an easy life. They're not sprayed with things to kill the bugs. They have to fight for their lives to produce their fruit, right? They have to work harder. So a side effect that plants are pretty good at defending themselves. So they can produce these compounds that are kind of detrimental to insects. So, a plant can increase the concentration of a compound in its leaves that might make the leaves taste bitter, and especially after a caterpillar takes the first few bites. It's an automatic production. So, plants can do that. Plants can produce all kinds of things to help deter insects, to help fight off pathogens. They have an immune system just like us, and it will kick in. And so one of the theories is that because of all the extra, compounds that are there, that will help with them, because they have, higher levels of antioxidants and other things that just helps them last a little bit longer. And you notice that if you buy food at the farmer's market versus the food you buy in the grocery store. Now, granted, it's just a lot fresher when it comes from the farmer's market, because it probably came out of the ground within the last couple days.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're buying it from the grocery store, it had to get picked, packed, trucked, warehoused, and then finally it ends up in the store. So,
it goes on a world cruise first.
World cruise.
Yeah, where has that tomato been? It's
all the way to Panama and back.
Or and who's sometimes you don't know what's happening to the laborers on these farms. I mean, even like coffee and things like that. You don't know if someone's like slave labor for your food. You don't know.
That's another side.
Yeah, in general with organic, you have like fair trade, those types of labels and designations. Reading the labels on things is important. Because just because it has the word organic on it, you might have to read the fine print and make sure that it actually is, and it's not just being used as a marketing ploy. Because there's strict organic standards when it comes to food, right? That's the USDA organic seal that we see on food. And then when you talk about gardening products, there's what's known as OMRI listed, which is OMRI. That stands for the Organic Materials Review Institute. So that's an independent third party. They're verifying that a product is truly organic, and it's not just saying that it is. So if you see the OMRI, OMRI seal on a gardening product, doesn't matter if it's pest control, fertilizer, soil, whatever, then it's past that stringent set of tests. And I could, if I have an organic farm, I can use this product. So it's truly organic. It's not just a marketing thing. So it is important to read those labels sometimes.
Yeah, to your point about the plants being able to produce compounds that taste a little bit bitter in order to protect themselves, we saw that very clearly in Africa, where you wondered why herds of antelope would cover such a huge distance in one day to eat. Instead of, like, they'd be at a plant and they would nibble around the top and a little bit on the sides and then move on. And instead of, why don't you just eat the whole plant? And we learned the same thing there, is that the plant would produce something bitter tasting and then the animal would move on. And even another antelope would already know, now that one's going to taste bad. So they would cover distances, and then the plant has a chance to regroup with itself and grow more leaves so that nothing gets eaten to the ground. But we did find, as far back as I can remember, that plants and shrubs did that. I don't think grasses did that, because it seemed like the grazing animals could eat down to the ground, and the grasses don't seem to protect themselves that way, as far as I remember.
Yeah, there's some really interesting stuff in some of the Michael Pollan books that I was reading about this farmer Joel Salatin and his regenerative farming practices. And essentially, if you move your herd from field to field, the grass can actually be more productive if it only gets the one bite by the animal, because if the animal eats too far down, it takes that grass a long time to come back. But if they only take one bite and move on, and then they keep moving the herd around, there's so many amazing practices that organic farmers have figured out to help build soil carbon, to help make a more productive farm. It's absolutely wonderful that that's going on, because we need that. We need these farms to be producing healthy, organic food that not only is good for our bodies, but it's also good for the soil, for the water, for our air, for the insects, for the whole food web. It's so important.
Yeah, you can't keep moving from farm to farm.
Yeah.
Like you have a farm ruin everything and then move and go get a new farm. It doesn't work that way. You have to learn, and it's, okay, I know, I suppose some people are willing to go live on Mars or find a new planet. I'm not going. I'm going to stay here and fix whatever messed up. I don't want to go find a new planet to live on. Thank you very much.
No, we have verdants in our backyard. It's funny. Mark, I want to talk about soil, because we were just talking about this with David Mizejewski from the National Wildlife Federation a couple days ago about gardening in the correct way, where you're working with nature and you're working with wildlife, growing native plants, and making sure there's water and food and shelter and shelter for the young. When it comes to wildlife and birds, butterflies, insects, salamanders, frogs, all those good things, which is part of that whole system, like you're talking about with organic gardening, whether it's your vegetables or your flowers or your trees. Soil, to me, we were just talking about like how we're actually creating dead zones in gardening or lack of gardening. And I was reading your book about the importance of soil, how it's just this really precious resource. If we take care of the soil, wouldn't that help alleviate these dead zones, so that, as communities, if each person, everyone's backyard, even if it's just the patio that you're growing on the patio organically, that even schools and community gardens, if everybody started really doing this organic practice and changing the soil structure back to what it is, wouldn't that help alleviate these dead zones that we've actually? I never even thought about how we've done that on a mass scale. I always think about how the monocrop farming and conventional farming has done that, but I never thought about how individually how we could change that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it all starts at home, and certainly there are a lot of bigger problems when you talk about sources of pollution that contribute to these dead zones in our waterways. A lot of the culprits are phosphorus and nitrogen ending up in our water, and then it makes it down to the local river, and then it makes it down to the local bay. And so, yeah, having a very healthy organic garden and taking care of your soil can help to manage those nutrients and keep them in your garden as opposed to letting them get away, because you certainly don't need to over-apply nutrients. Plants are quite good at getting those nutrients out of the soil if it's prepared right. And native soil has a lot to give. Native topsoil has taken centuries to be produced. It takes a long time to make soil. You can't just go make soil in the backyard. You can make compost in the backyard, but soil itself is a very complex thing, right? And it has amazing ability to hold on to nutrients and water. It's a home for microbes. So, and of course those bigger ones, the macro fauna of the soil, the worms and whatnot, and the arthropods that are in the soil. But it pays to take care of your soil from the beginning. And the very first thing to do in any garden, new or established, if you don't know, if you feel like something's amiss, you're not getting the same yields you used to, getting a soil test is my number one recommendation to find out what's in your soil, what the pH of the soil is, and what nutrients are there. Because then you can take steps to add certain things if they're lacking by using minerals. And there's all kinds of fertilizers. There's vegetable-based fertilizers. There's plant-based. There's plant-based. There's animal-based, and then there's mineral amendments. So mineral amendments are things that are naturally produced. So things like azomite, which is a mineral that's mined out of the ground. It's a very unique deposit formed a long time ago, but it just has a little bit of everything. It's got all the micronutrients in it. You look at other fertilizers like alfalfa meal, that can provide a little bit of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. You can even use things like crab shell, right? It's a wonderful fertilizer. I mean, you have to think that we have all these things available to us. They're not really waste products. These are valuable resources that we need to be converting into fertilizer to use in our garden.
So this could add to the food waste problem we have. I mean, when you look at, we do a lot of interviews with Global Green USA. They're like the Green Cross of America, and they have this initiative to get, not just people in their backyards composting, but even apartment complexes to start composting because of the mass food waste problem we have in this country. And it's billions of tons of food waste, and it ends up in landfills. And it's like, wait a minute, and some things are like some things are just like, here's all this food coming out of a restaurant. So like if we could grab, it's like the biodiesel, right? We want the chip oil, your French fries oil or whatever. If we can grab some of that food waste and put it back into the soil, we would be helping the country in the whole with the soil.
Absolutely. There's nothing better than making your own compost in the backyard. It's free. It's keeping that stuff out of the landfill. There's so many good reasons for doing that. And plus, you're making a very beneficial soil amendment that you otherwise have to go out and purchase. And granted, I've been making compost for decades. And, you keep adding to the pile. You keep adding to the pile. And, for me, it takes, 3 or 4 years to build up a pile to the point like, all right, I'm going to harvest this now. But then you spread it out in the garden. You're like, where did that just disappeared in like 5 seconds, So it's great to have, there's always a local supplier of compost, and they're making compost again from local ingredients. And some of the really great ones are taking in food waste from restaurants, from other places, and then composting that on an industrial scale. And then, converting that back into compost to use in the garden so that carbon isn't going away. It stays local and eventually gets back in the ground to help build soil carbon levels, which is important.
Wow, this is very cool. And so now the other thing I wanted to touch on, lawns, because we were all starting to talk about how we shouldn't have lawns if you live in California, droughts, all the fertilizers that, the runoff that goes into the street and then out into the ocean creates harmful algal blooms. And so like lawns are bad, right? And then you have this whole section of your book saying they're not bad. It's how you're doing them.
Yeah.
It's like lawns are actually a good thing if they're done right, right? So what are the benefits of having a lawn if done correctly?
Well, I would definitely recommend, kind of limiting the lawn space.
Yeah.
But, grass is a fantastic filter. It's going to help filter things out of the air. It's producing a whole lot of oxygen. It also will help cool. So grassy areas are much cooler than, impervious surface or even areas with no lawn whatsoever. If it's just bare earth is going to be hotter than a grassy area, so it helps to cool down too. It's a place to go outside and reconnect with nature. It's a place to walk barefoot. It's a place to play with your kids or your pets. There's so many memories that we all, I think, that a lot of people have from lawns and being in grass. And even if you live in the city and you live in an apartment, there's parks, and there's nothing like going to that park and seeing that green. That it's the first thing to green up in spring. When the lawn starts growing, that means that spring has officially returned, and the soil is warming up. So yeah, there's some good info on basic lawn care in the book. One thing is also choosing the right grass species for your lawn. That is incredibly important, because if you choose the wrong one, it's just not going to do well, and you're going to feel like you need to call that 1-800 number to Chemical Town to come in and fix it. But that's not what you need. Sometimes it's just making the right choice. So, like, there's this grass type called Eco Lawn. It's from this place called Wildflower Farm. It's extremely low maintenance lawn seed. You don't have to mow it every weekend. The stuff is great. It's different fescue varieties, even does well in some shade. So, it's about choosing the right species of grass and then taking care of it properly. And you don't need all the extra pesticides. You just have to manage it properly. And there's some things you got to do for that. So if you really want the lawn, you can do it. Another thing that really helps lawns is, or any garden for that matter, just because of how much it helps the soil, is biochar. Biochar is an amazing soil additive that's permanent. Once you add it, it's a lifetime amendment. Biochar helps to hold nutrients and water. It's a home for soil microbes. This stuff is absolutely amazing on what it does for plant growth. And that, when added to a lawn management program, because, again, add it once, it's there for life. It's a fantastic amendment to help increase the health of a lawn.
And leave the dandelions alone. They're cool. I love the dandelions. I think you're right, and it's it's picnic time. You want to sit and have a picnic on the grass, and it's a good family thing to have that. And I think you're right. Yeah, you don't need this massive lawn. And over here in the desert. And by the way, I love that you put a whole map for that. You put the map of the country in your book, so you can see like what region you're in and what kind of grasses that should be in your lawn. But also out here they tear up, we do get grass, and it's so cool in the monsoon season to see the desert just green up, and it's like, and it's true whenever Nancy and I travel out of the desert and we see green, we kind of we
go into shock.
We're kind of like we're zombies in a way. We're just like drooling over it. It's like, wow. But when the grass part, a lot of people out here just start putting gravel, and for us, I know people think it's good and it keeps it cooler, but it actually heats up your house. It heats up the plant.
Heat up everything.
And it raises the temperature. You can walk, if you just leave dirt or do like a ground cover or something, you can just walk through a neighborhood and see the difference in temperature versus if they're using gravel. So would you say instead of gravel, do like a ground cover or just plant something in a way?
Yeah, plant something, plant anything. Plants are going to help cool down the environment, a microclimate or the entire yard. The more plants, the better, because they are breathing. There is water coming out of them at all times in the form of vapor. So that's cooling the air, because it's cooling. The plant is cooling itself off at the same time. The leaves are just trying to reduce the temperature of the leaf, right? And with a lawn, hey, if it's green, it's good. Like, there should be clover in a lawn mix. There used to be all the pasture blends a long time ago. Like there was all kinds of other things, clovers and other things for animals to eat, for just part of the lawn blend. And slowly over time, we wanted this like really pure. No, it has to be pure grass. Only this one species. And it's like, well,
I think it's weird. It's weird.
Like I get it. Like, hey, if you're golfing, like, yeah, I understand. You need it to be absolutely perfect on the green. And I'm not a big golfing fan, but my grandfather's a golfer. I know people. Hey, if that's the way you connect with nature, more power to you. I'd encourage you to get out in the garden more. But yeah. So a little bit of clover, a little bit of dandelion, no big deal. It's still a beautiful place for insects, for people to play, for all those things. So.
I think it's funny, out in the desert, we're already hot, and in order to not have weeds, people throw gravel down, and then you get to pick the weeds out from between the gravel.
The weeds are like, hey, let us out. We see sunshine.
Yeah, and it's uncomfortable to be on your hands and knees in gravel and try to pick out weeds. And it is hot. You can put your hand above, especially when they mound it up around a tree or something. You can put your hand above the gravel about 3 inches, and you will feel the heat. And they're like, no, it's a mulch. I'm like, no, it's not. It's just not a mulch.
Yeah,
it's gravel, and it's hot.
And that's the same with leaves, right? In your area, or anywhere in this country, even out here in the desert, we have forests. Is to leave the leaves, right, and not rake them away, because that actually helps your soil too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm every year I just blow them all to the edge of the property, to the wood line, and I just blow them into the woods. They're great mulch. But yeah, the more you can leave things like that, even twigs and sticks, little twigs and sticks that fall, if you break them up and just throw them in the bed, that's carbon that should stay there. You don't have to cart it away. And there's definitely value in leaving plant material up over the winter. I know a lot of tradition is tied around, let's clean up the garden beds, let's remove all the dead stems and everything from the prior year. But if you leave that stuff, it's places for ground beetles to hide, it's places for other insects to be. Just yesterday, I was out there just watching these birds rummage through all the debris. They're definitely eating. They're finding bugs. You see like, that one's got a bug. I was looking at it with my kids, like, look, that one's got a bug. That one's got a bug. So they're just like rooting around there, finding stuff. So it's cover for insects, but then those become food for birds, and that's the whole cycle. If you get out there and you have an organic garden, I mean, if I was not an organic gardener and I had been spraying, I'd be worried. I'd be like, oh, those birds are eating bugs that are poisoned. That's just
exactly.
I don't want to do that. I want to go outside and be contributing to nature, be one with nature, be part of the experience, and that's absolutely happening when you watch that bird come in and eat things in your garden, and then that's the best thing ever in my opinion. But.
Yeah, and then they come back in the summer when you have aphids, and they're like, oh, I remember this guy's got bugs.
Let's go harvest. Well, no, and that's such a big deal, because I think a lot of people put feeders out and things like that, and sometimes you do in the beginning, but I watch, I always wonder about what we're feeding the birds. You go to like a big box store and you buy all this seed, and it's got corn in it and all this, and I'm always wondering, like, where has this seed been? Like, how much, like, even in the processing part, I mean, how clean can it be for the birds? And I always wonder about birds going and eating, because you see birds, especially like in certain neighborhoods, you'll see a bird come in with bumps, and I mean, it belonged to this Facebook birding group, and people will start putting up alerts about, hey, in our neighborhood, have you seen this happen with this bird? And someone will start saying, well, I saw a bird over here, and it's like, is someone using pesticides, or what's going on, or is there some, bacteria or virus, or, and I always wonder about what are we doing to the birds, because they are the canaries, literally,
we
telling
saw a
us.
lot of that in 2019.
Yeah, and I always wonder about the air and the water and all this runoff. If a bird sees a puddle, they're going to go drink out of it if they're thirsty, and a butterfly is going to, go, flitter around and go puddling, So I I'm paranoid about it. Like I want to go walk around neighborhoods with a big shovel and take all the gravel away, and then I just want to go plant and make everything green. Everything needs to be green and happy. But I do want to touch on this because I know, and then we got to ask about where you want to take a 1 hour walk in a garden and who with. Harvesting seeds because there's harvesting, collecting. Then I know some people are doing it and they're looking at what they're going to do in the spring to plant them. In the fall it's a good time. But I know a lot of people are sitting there going, okay, we're going to plant something this year, or maybe they're already gardening, but it's like seed catalog time, right? We're all looking at them going, ooh, let's do this. And then you start looking at all these different seeds, and you really covered this well in the book. There's GMO versus GE, so we should touch on that, and organic, hybrid, and heirloom. Where should we? I know heirloom seeds are good, but the GMO, the GE, where are we on that? Because that gets very confusing.
Yeah, right. So I definitely gave that a couple of pages in the book. And collecting your own seed, it actually is a lot easier than most people might think. And there's some tips in the book about how to collect seed of various things. Like our favorite one to collect and save is peas. So the kids love the crunchy peas, and they're just so easy to save. You just let some pods go all the way till they're dry and tan colored, and you can shake them. You can hear the seeds in there, and they look totally wrinkled, just like they do when they come out of a seed packet. But those are quality seeds, and we just save them from year to year, and they're going to be different than the very first ones that you planted. So, when you buy a packet of seeds, it's going to say something on it, right? Whether it's, heirloom, hybrid, sometimes open pollinated on the seed packet. And it's a particular cultivar, right? Like it'll have a name, right? So like snow, like for peas, for example, it could be snow giant or something. But down the line, because in nature the peas are crossing with other pea plants, and if you're growing more than one type, well, they can cross-pollinate, and so the resultant, babies, the next generation of seed, they're going to be a little different than the parent generation, but there's nothing wrong with that. They're still going to make crunchy peas, and if you want, you can even select, like, ooh, this pod is gigantic. I'm going to let those peas mature all the way, then dry up, and then I'm going to plant those next year, and you can kind of select over time for certain things. There's another thing that I do in the garden each year with lettuce is a great example. So every year I will let a couple of my lettuce plants, usually the ones that I like the best, that look nice, that seem to be a bit hardier in some way, and I'll let them go all the way to seed. And then I take that seed and I just kind of thrash it around the garden a little bit. And then every year we have seedlings that just come up naturally of lettuce. So I don't plant a whole lot of lettuce because it's constantly coming up, constantly growing. If you do that for a few seasons in your garden, you're going to naturally end up with lettuce, genetics that are a bit tougher, more adapted to your local climate. And it's fantastic. Like every spring we have lettuce that comes up and I don't have to do anything. So there's just some really fun things to do collecting your own seeds in the garden. And I know that you wanted to touch about, GMO versus GE. So for those that don't know, GMO is genetically modified organism. And then GE is genetically engineered. Okay, so in general, in the media and everything else, everyone knows GMO. Like there's GMO free, right? There's a label. There's a whole thing about it now, right? GMO free versus GE. And in the book, because I like science, and science is good. I like science. Science tells us that
you got me all
climate
geeky out in this. It's cool.
No, right? It does get a little soil geeky at times and different aspects. But so genetic engineered, that to me is the seed that I am personally not interested in. So genetic engineering produced seeds like corn that is resistant to glyphosate, which is a herbicide. And so farmers can then spray the corn with this glyphosate herbicide, and the corn doesn't die, but the weeds do, right? Yeah. So in theory, that sounds wonderful. In theory, it sounds like, wow, this can reduce the amount of pesticide we're spraying, and it can make our yields go up. Well, let's do it. So they tried that experiment, and guess what? It didn't work because farms are applying more herbicide than ever, and the weeds have become resistant.
Right.
So now we have what are kind of dubbed the super weeds that can handle some spraying of these these herbicides, and yet they're still alive. So it didn't have the intended outcome, right? Also, another reason why I don't like GE seeds is that it takes power away from a farmer. When you're growing in your backyard, it doesn't seem like much because, like, hey, it's like the seed catalogs is one of the greatest things ever. Like sitting down with a seed catalog in the winter and deciding what you're going to grow, and then your seeds come in. It's so wonderful. But when you think about it on a much bigger scale than that, you're talking about farmers that grow food to feed the world. That's very important. And we can't take away the ability of farmers to feed themselves, their communities, their countries. It's very important.
Right. And
there was this GE technology that was coming out called the Terminator gene. So this thing they made, it essentially would cause a plant not to produce viable seed.
Yes.
So if you have this gene that tells a plant, hey, don't produce viable seed, that to me is one of the worst things that could possibly ever happen on the planet, because it means farmers can't harvest their own seeds, right? And think about it. If that got out into the wild, if that somehow got out in the wild and native plants couldn't produce seed anymore, we'd be ruined in a matter of generations. The earth would fall apart because
except for the fact that the people who made that are waiting for the farmers to come buy more of their seed, because that's the only place that they can now get seed like that.
Exactly.
Contract.
And so that's kind of a monopoly that our government was supposed to stop instead of help. And I also like to point out that it's really bad for the soil. It's bad for the animals.
And
it's
even
bad
some
for
of the
water.
bugs, that they have a superworm or something.
Yeah,
that
the
now.
cornworm. All we're doing is just having to make more debilitating poisons. Where when we just started out, you just had to get some birds or some praying mantis, or just go pick the stink bug up.
Go play with it. We're back to the stink bug.
No, I mean, we've made this whole mess.
I know, but but we have this ability, and that's my point. I think at the end of the day, sometimes, especially now, we see what's going on in the world, and it's like, we look at the future, our kids, taking care of them and the planet for them. And for nature, and for us to all breathe and not get all these crazy cancers that are out there. And I really appreciate that you've written this book, because you can start by growing herbs, like you talk about how we're going to the store and buying herbs, and all this plastic waste is going into landfills and ends up in the ocean, and it ends up in your fish at the end of the day. So I think that these are all these positive ways to counteract that. We can take control over this situation, and we should stand up to things that are not good for us, but at the same time, we can take action, and it's fun to get kids involved, and you've got some fun projects. I want to go paint tires and do crazy. I want to go take my file cabinet outside and plant things in it now after reading your book.
Now we know what to do with our old hiking boots.
Oh yeah, I've got hiking boots that are ready. They're ready. They're like 5 years old, of many trails, and I'm going to plant them and put them up on Instagram.
And they do have microbes in them already.
I know. They've got a lot. They've been around. But Mark, before you go, if you could take a 1 hour walk with anyone alive or passed on, who would it be, and what garden anywhere in the world would you go for that walk?
That is a good question. Alive or dead, anyone in the world for a 1 hour walk? Well, I probably would go to a public garden, because we're talking about walking in a garden. And, I'm pretty partial to some of the gardens up here in my neck of the woods in southeast Pennsylvania, but when I was a lot younger, I fell in love with Callaway Gardens in Georgia. I love that garden. It's got some wonderful hiking trails on that property. So I would say it would be a walk through the woods at Callaway Gardens. And it's going to be pretty cheesy, but I would say my wife. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Just because she is my best friend, and I love walking in the woods with her and the kids. And if I had to choose one, I mean, I could say Einstein or Rachel,
Rachel Carlson.
Right? Yeah, it's like I can choose all kinds of people, but it's like, when it comes down to it,
cool, huh?
I'm happy when I'm in my garden with my family. So.
Yeah, you can bring your kids. I mean, I think that's one of the things. That's why we started this Facebook group, because we want people to get out and start to notice things and just get out and look at bugs. Even if it's the same walk every day, you see something new and you learn ecosystem. So thank you so much for joining us, Mark. Don't be a stranger. Keep us posted as you go on and grow and how your book keeps going out. I love this. Everyone, again, the book is Practical Organic Gardening, The No-Nonsense Guide to Growing Naturally. You can get it on Amazon. Again, it's by Mark Highland. And go to his website, organicmechanicsoil.com. And, Mark, here's your song, okay, because you pick up stink bugs with your hands. This is not a stink bug song, but because it's coming to that day, Groundhog Day is it's right around the corner. This song, and you guys are just going to keep getting snow anyway. So, but anyhow, it's just not going away for you for this. This winter is going to extend it. But this song, I think it's one of the best gardening songs ever. It's called "The Groundhog's Dream." It's from our friend here, Wally Lauder, here in Tucson. So you can go to wallylauder.com, everyone. I want to call it "The Groundhog's Revenge." So here's your song. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
You take care. Here it is, everyone. The Groundhog's Dream.
There's a groundhog living beneath my shed, and my neighbor wants to see it dead. She thinks it's a nuisance, she thinks it's a pest, she thinks it's gonna make her garden a mess. Wants me to get rid of it soon, but I don't want to see it off to its doom. She waits in her yard with a shovel in her hand. She'll whack it on the head if she can. Run, groundhog, run if you can. Run from the woman with a shovel in her hand. Run to your home under my shed, 'cause my neighbor wants to see you dead. Recently, one starry night, while the groundhog was asleep, he stirred inside his little den and had himself a dream. He dreamed my neighbor was in her yard. He came across her and he gave her a start. She reached for a shovel, but in between there were 10 groundhogs looking angry and mean. She turned the other way to run for the door, but there were 10 groundhogs, that's right, 10 more. They don't eat meat, but they were gnashing their teeth. They could put her underground and wait a few weeks. Run, neighbor woman, run if you can. Run from the Renegade Groundhog band. Run down the street, run out of town, 'cause those groundhogs don't wanna see you around. Living beneath my shed, and my neighbor wants to see it dead. She thinks it wants to eat her greens, but the groundhog has other dreams. The groundhog has other dreams. The groundhog has other dreams.